The Daily Code Snippet. Finishing up tables, we went over a few last items. First, we clarified the use of the table header element in rows when you want to emphasize the first cell of each row as an identifier for subsequent cells in that row. This is similar to when we create a row of table header elements so that the first cell of each column identifies the subsequent cells in the column. This is a code example. It would display like this with some slight adjustments to the styling to emphasize the rows and the table header row. Next, we introduce two elements used to add styling to a column. Column group and column. The column group element groups columns together while the column element identifies a column so that you can target it with styling. The column group element is added right after the table opening tag and will contain a total number of columns in your table by tagging each with a column element. Adding styling to the second column element affects the second column. If you aren't styling a column, you should include a blank column as a placeholder. You see the column group added right at the top. We have two column elements, not three, even though there are three columns, because one of our column elements has a span attribute to encompass two columns. Both column elements have style embedded in the HTML. The first two columns have a light gray background color, and the final column has a yellow background color. It will display like this. Then we moved on to how to improve the accessibility of our tables. The first concept we went over is the addition of semantic elements that identify the role that certain elements are playing in our table. Table head, table body, and table foot. It may seem redundant to add the table head to further identify the first row as a header row, but it is useful for assistive devices. It can clearly differentiate the header section from the body or main content, which is enclosed in a table body element. Footer information would be in a table foot element. This is ancillary information that puts the table data in context or may provide additional information to clarify the data presented. Here is a code example. This code will display like this. We really aren't seeing anything different externally, but we are helping the assistive device understand the contents of our table. We have added a table foot with an additional note that spans all 5 columns using the colspan attribute, and we use an embedded styling to make the typography display a little smaller. Finally, we learned how the caption element or the scope attribute help with accessibility. The caption element is used to describe the table's purpose. This allows the user to decide whether they need to read the rest of the table or if it can be skipped, especially if using an assistive device that will read data cell by cell. The scope attribute can be added to the table header elements to reinforce the role to improve a user's experience. At times, assistive devices draw the wrong conclusion of the role and the scope provides clarification. The scope attribute has a value of COL when it is a header element for a column and the value of ROW when it is in a header element for a row. So it specifies the top of a column and the first element of a row. The code would look like this. Again, we don't really see a lot of external changes and with how we have adjusted our code other than the presence of a caption and the new language in our footer. A final consideration with the colspan and rowspan attributes. While this may be aesthetically pleasing to sighted users to not see repeated data, as the information in a table is read to a user using an assisted device, the order helps the user understand to which column or row the data belongs. So if a column or row is skipped, it can cause confusion. To make a table more accessible, it is preferable to avoid using these attributes. If it is required to use these attributes to present complicated data, then break up the data into smaller related tables that would allow you to avoid using the colspan or rowspan attributes. Presented by Designers Learn Code.